All right, so welcome back. Uh, it almost worked as expected, and apparently I need to append my instructions there for the lab. All we're missing is the right OpenSSL sources. Okay, so in this version of Apache, we have to include the sources of OpenSSL to be able to run it correctly. So here's how we get the sources. We navigate to the Raider site for this class, and then we go ahead and click on openssl.tgz, and this is going to save it to our local system. All right. Once we saved it, and by the way, the way these files are made is I compile them earlier, and that way you can just distribute them as a directory. So once you downloaded them, they are under the downloads directory. So we'll go ahead and say, go ahead and extract the OpenSSL sources. So now we have OpenSSL, and I of course got rid of my Apache system, so I'll go ahead and download that as well. I downloaded by clicking on the version of Apache, download it. All right, and so now under downloads, I also have my sources. I'll move them closer here. tar xzbf on that. All right, and so now I hope we're back in business. We're going to demonstrate how to install SSL in Apache and how to create our own certificates. So we'll go ahead and go back into the Apache directory and type in configure, and we'll say prefix equals home Knoppix Apache, and we'll say enable SSL, and we'll say with SSL, and for that we will go out one directory and into OpenSSL. So it's the same as saying with SSL home Knoppix OpenSSL. All right, we'll let that cook for just a second. So yeah, what we were missing here was the instruction to do that. Let's see. Let's see. That'll be back in here. And yeah, I don't have these instructions. So I'll correct that, and we'll add another set of instructions prior to enabling SSL. Yes. Sure. So we're going to add with -SSL home Knoppix OpenSSL, and I'll show you how to create this directory in the instructions as well. Okay, so now, yes, say again? No, we can do that as a regular Knoppix user. Okay, so now once I configure this, I'll say make, and then after that make install. So to create these instructions, we'll just say okay, let's see. Raider.js.edu 246. Here's our location, and we'll say, all right, we'll say 0. Download OpenSSL sources. And the instructions here will be cd home Knoppix, and then wget on this, finally tar xdvf on the openssl. Perfect. And then we will use with SSL equals, and that's under home Knoppix openssl. All right, so I think I caught up the instructions to to where we are with the demo. Okay, so the demo here is going to compile and install Apache. In the meantime, what we can take a look at is how to create. We can take a look at how to create our own certificate. And so to do that, we'll actually use the openssl command line. Okay, command line. So this is doing fine. Make install. The command line. So when I just type in openssl on the Unix system, I get the openssl command line. Okay, and so then you can exit from here. But the command that I'd like you to use to create our certificates is right here. We'll say openssl req to create a new certificate, x509 nodes out. And now after the out parameter, this is going to be our server. That's going to be our server public certificate. Let's see. Certificate key, certificate file, certificate key. So we'll go ahead and type in here server.crt, and then followed by keyout server.key. Right here. Dash keyout server.key. Okay, and when I run this, notice what happens. A 1024 RSA private key was generated. Okay, so the private key is the server.key. And now we're going to go ahead and sign our own public certificate. To do that, we have to specify that identity information. So we'll start with US. So this is the job of VeriSign and the other companies. We'll say it's US, state or province, Michigan. Notice that this has to be global, right? So you can't just call it state. In India, there are provinces. In Canada, there are provinces. Next, we're going to use locality, like a city. So we'll say Grand Rapids. Organizational name, we'll call that CO246. And unit, let's just call it Monday, for Monday night. Normally, this would be maybe Grand Rapids Community College Information Technology Office. Okay. And then common name. Now, this is the most important part, because the common name means the URL that we'll be using. I will create my own website with a URL called CO246, www.co246.com. And then email address, we can put whatever we want here. So at this point, okay, I have a server.crt and server.key. If I look inside of these files, okay, I'm looking inside of these files, they are base64 encoded, okay, but I can treat them like text files. I can copy and paste them. I can attach them to an email. Okay, so I have those two files, and currently this is my private key, this is my public key. So maybe I'll name them this way. Actually, let's keep the names the same, that way they match the lab. So now I am ready to configure Apache to use these certificates. I'll go inside of Apache, I'll go inside of the config directory. Now, inside of my config file, let me make this slightly bigger. Inside of the config file, look at this if statement. It says, if module mod SSL is enabled, then include a special configuration file called ssl.conf. Okay? So, how do we know that SSL is, in fact, compiled? Well, we can run the httpd-l. And when I run it, I can see that I have SSL compiled. So that if statement will trigger, it'll actually include my config file. If I try to start my Apache SSL system right now, it would say that the certificates are in the wrong places, because ssl.conf here, which is triggered, it expects certificates in a specific place. You see these two files, or you see this certificate location right here. It's looking for the public key, and then here it's looking for the private key. All right. So I need to do one of two things: either move my certificates in the specific directory, or I can modify the config file and specify where this certificate is at. Okay. So to make things matching the lab, let me just see what we did here. So we do both. We place the certificate in the config directory, and then we modify the files. So let's do that. I'm going to say move out of home napix the server.key, and then move also the server certificate. So now my two files are in my config directory. Finally, I'm going to modify my ssl.conf file, and I'll go ahead and all I have to do here is just delete this middle section, because this puts it in the right directory. Whoops, not this one. This one right here. Okay, so these two have to be valid paths. Okay, let me save it, let me activate it, let me run it, and then I'll explain more about ssl.conf and what it does. So now it's time to start. We'll go to bin. Now there's a change. Now when we start Apache with SSL, we have to issue start SSL. Okay, let's see how that runs inside of Iceweasel. HTTPS localhost, and notice that I did not specify port 8080 because I'm actually running this as root. You might have to specify port 8080 afterwards, or whatever port the SSL is listing on, because SSL is going to listen on a different port than HTTP. You can run HTTP and SSL at the same time. They're different ports. By default, it's 443. So right now, let me say I understand the risks and download my certificate. Let's preview my certificate. My certificate says the common name is CO246. It's issued on the 12th of March. Very important. I've issued certificates that start in the future because of like a time difference, whatever, and it wouldn't work. Why? Because it starts at a specific time and it expires on a specific date as well. And there's some fingerprints here involved. In details, my certificate is issued by the certificate is issued by me. Okay, So the browser is not going to be happy with it because the browser does not recognize me as the authority. But I can go ahead and run it and notice that my encryption exists. Okay, I'm running encrypted. I have SSL. And I could say, install the certificate, so the browser, go ahead and remember it as a trusted certificate. Okay? But at this point, my SSL certificate is working and the encryption is taking place. Any questions so far? All right, we lost a little bit of time today, so what I'll make sure is that if you, well, we still have an hour to go, but if you don't have enough time today, we'll make time next week to make sure that you have time to play with this part. Okay, so let me talk just for a moment about SSL.conf. Okay, notice that we have a listen directive right inside of this config file, and it looks just like the listen directive in our httpd.conf. Only here we're going to specify the SSL listening port. Next, we have a set of definitions right here, the cipher suite. The server, when it receives a request for a connection from the browser, is going to negotiate with the browser what is the highest encryption algorithm that you can support. Okay? And you get to, as the server administrator, decide what are the allowed combinations. Notice that by default we support a low encryption set. If you were to be scanned by the PCI compliance system, this would come up as a problem, because now browsers that are very basic can negotiate a very low encryption rate. Okay? So you might have to cut the medium, the low, and only require a high level of encryption. So this is the cipher suite that you have as choices, basically. And then this is our certificate file. Here is the key file. And this is another directive that often is used when you have a certificate that you bought from a party like Global SSL or Global Sign, which requires an intermediate certificate. Okay, and so that looks fine. All right, let's stop that here. So what we did today in this lab is we compiled Apache, we created our own certificate. We did this with the openssl command. This is the command that we used. This command automatically created a private key, our server.key, and a public key. And we went through the process of signing this key by ourselves. Okay, so again, the piece that that I added to the instructions that should have worked better was including the openssl sources and including that on the config line. All right. Well, let me stop this.